Greetings, my name is Mark Amaru Pinkham, and I am the director of the Order and Mystery School of the Seven Rays. I'll be your host during this presentation on Sedona, City of the Star People. We in the Order and Mystery School of the Seven Rays are dedicated to bringing you complete and easy to understand video presentations such as this one that, as accurately as possible, reveal the true history of the human race on Earth, much or most of which has been destroyed or lost or hidden. If you would like to be alerted of any new videos that we produce, please click on the subscribe button below. Now in this video presentation, I'll offer you a synopsis of my book, Sedona, City of the Star People. It's a book that covers the ancient history of Sedona when it was Palatkwapi, a temple city built by the Kachina Star People that is part of the legend of the Hopis. According to one of their legends regarding Palatkwapi, the Hopis arrived on the coast of the Americas after island hopping across the Pacific Ocean. Apparently, the ancient Pacific continent of Mu or Lemuria had by that time divided into hundreds and thousands of islands. Upon reaching the shores of the Americas, the Hopis turned back to survey from whence they'd come, and they did so just in time to witness most of the islands of their path sink to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Thus, it has been speculated that their arrival in America either corresponded to the planetary deluge that sunk Atlantis and began what they call the Fourth World, or it was a deluge that occurred at a much earlier time period. The picture on your screen is Lemuria before it was divided into those thousands of islands. Its division into islands has been estimated to be as far back as 70,000 years ago, which is the time that the maker of this map, the Lemurian researcher James Churchward, speculated that migrations from Mu to North America first began. The Hopis were accompanied to North America by some star people that they referred to as Kachinas. The Kachinas and the Hopis had been part of the Lemurian civilization. Upon setting foot on their new homeland in the Americas, the Hopis were greeted by the leader of all the Kachinas, who's known as Masao. Masao introduced himself as the Lord of the World. Masao quickly set about dividing the Hopis into clans and then set them in migrations throughout the Americas. Each clan was instructed to travel as far south as possible, as far north as they could, and then as far east and west as possible. And then after completing their migrations, they were to meet Masao in the southwest region of North America, and he would then lead them to their new homes. During the ensuing thousands of years, the Hopi clans were accompanied by the Star People who led them to areas in Mexico and Central and South America that were already occupied with active civilizations founded by earlier waves of settlers from Mu. Today, the Hopis reflect the influence of these southern civilizations on them through their Satan dances and through their symbols, such as the stair-step cross that is known in the Andes as the Chicana. Now, 1,000 years later, when all the clans reunited, they recounted having visited these southern empires. And they also talked about having spent time in Palatkwapi, which is a name meaning red house or red place. In Palatkwapi, which was a temple city built and lived in by the Kachinas, the Hopi clans learned many of the mysteries of the universe and of human existence, including how to evolve the human form through the practices that came about through awakening the inner evolutionary force of Kundalini that would lead them to the goal of human existence, the self-knowledge that the infinite spirit exists within me as me. In Palatkwapi, the Hopis also learned many of the Kachina dances that they currently perform annually on their reservation. When each clan left Palatkwapi, they followed a similar trail north that led them to what is now the Hopi Reservation. This trail was later used by settlers and miners in the Southwest and named the Palatkwapi Trail. And the map in front of you is the Palatkwapi Trail when it was united with Prescott and the mines of Jerome. And from those two places, it would lead them to the Hopi Reservation. Although there has been speculation that the location of Palatkwapi could be many different places, the one place that fits the Hopi's description of Palatkwapi, the one that fits it the best, is Sedona, Arizona. And this was the conclusion of Jesse Fuchs, who was the best known anthropologist to live and study among the Hopis. In fact, so certain was Fuchs that Sedona is indeed Palatkwapi that he named one of the ancient Hopi ruins discovered in Sedona Palatki. Palatki is a name that's derived from Palatkwapi. My own introduction to Palatkwapi occurred in February 1987 when I arrived in Sedona for the first time. And this was during the worst snowstorm in 20 years. So I found a hotel, and the next day I visited a store next to it. When I inquired from the store manager where I should go in Sedona, he took out a map of the 4 main vortexes of the area, and he pointed to one that I should visit first, and it was Boynton Canyon. Later that day, I found myself walking along a snow-covered trail into a huge canyon that was at least 2 miles long. As I walked, I kept asking my inner guidance to show me where I should go in the canyon, and I got no answer. But after 1.5 miles, I spied a ledge that jutted out from the side of the canyon, and then my inner voice finally spoke up and instructed me to climb up to that ledge. Upon arriving at the ledge, I dusted it off and then sat down to meditate. Within a few minutes, my inner voice spoke up again, and he told me to look in front of me. There, across the canyon, were what looked like 3 gigantic pillars. They didn't look like they had been created naturally, since there were no other rock formations remotely like them in the canyon. In fact, they appeared as if they had been formed under the influence of some intelligence. And then, as I looked around the canyon, I spotted other red rock formations that also did not look like they had been created by nature. One is on your screen. It's a big monolith. You can notice a face about 2/3 of the way up. It has big lips and eyes. And in this picture, you notice a head on a base. The head has a face, has a cap on top of it. If you look to the right of the screen, that face can be divided up into 2 faces. So there again, it definitely appears as though there is some intelligence behind its creation. Then after seeing these 2 monoliths, I started to scan the canyon floor, and I found it dotted with temples that were definitely not natural. They appeared to be carved from the red rock, and they possessed perfect shapes, both square and pyramidal shapes. Each temple had designs and symbols carved into them, and some even looked like they were painted colors other than that of the red rock. And among the temples, I spotted statues of exotic-looking people that were similar to the statues I had seen in India. In the center of one group of temples was a large silver saucer craft that had golden discs on all 4 sides of it. A moment later, my inner voice spoke up and instructed me to look at a nearby symbol that also jutted out from the side of the canyon. You can see it in the slide in front of you. It looks like a human head, possibly that of a Native American, upon which is perched a much smaller head. My inner voice informed me that this was a colony or symbol of a colony of Lemuria, the lower head being that of the Native Americans and the smaller head on top of it being that of the Lemurian colonists. This symbol gave me some perspective as to who had built these temples, and since I knew that Lemuria had existed many thousands of years ago, I knew these temples were extremely old. And I reflected back to some of the information I knew about Lemuria that I'd got from James Churchward's books about Mu, and in which he maintained that the first settlers from Lemuria arrived in the American Southwest approximately 70,000 years ago, so possibly the temples were that old. He also stated that the colonists from Mu were enlightened masters, which he called Nakals, which is a name meaning serpents. In fact, in the ancient times, all the enlightened masters, apparently all over the world, were named serpents and dragons. So these Nakals had sailed from Mu, both east and west, to found settlements in both the Americas and Asia. Churchward claimed that one of the destinations of the Nakals was India, which explained why I was seeing statues similar to those I had seen in India, and why the rocks at the entrance of Boynton Canyon that you see in your screen has the same contour as some of the temples and ashrams I had seen in India. One statue that I later discovered in another part of Sedona is identical to many elephant statues I had seen in India. And in the archaeological site of Palatkwapi, I also found what looked to be a Hindu Om symbol that I found has been dated back as far as 15,000 years ago. Now, eventually, I left my perch on the ledge and I wandered down to the temple floor, hoping to get a closer look at those temples I'd seen from a distance and perhaps even enter one of them. Unfortunately, as I was to soon find out, this was not to be the case. I would spot one of the temples and then head towards it, but when I finally reached it, it was very different from how I had seen it from a distance. It appeared as though as I walked towards it, it had become badly eroded, and by the time I got to it, much or most of it was gone. I then realized that I was seeing the temples as they are today, and what I had been seeing from the ledge above is how these temples looked thousands of years ago and how they continue to appear on higher dimensions. Apparently, I had tapped into one of those dimensions. I would later learn that over the course of its history, Sedona has been covered with water many times. So the temples had indeed been severely eroded by water. The most recent flood that submerged them occurred approximately 10,000 BCE. And this was a flood that covered the entire Southwest with water. So there were many questions that I had that day that weren't answered. So when I finally left Boynton Canyon later on, I vowed to continue to return to that canyon with the goal of truly understanding these temples, why they were built, and who their builders were. And since that fateful visit in 1987, I have returned to Sedona many, many times, and I eventually moved there in 2004. And during this time period, I have found many red rock formations that I believe are also remnants of Palatkwapi, including the Sphinx and honey bear on your screen. Most recently, I was directed to climb up one of the walls of Boynton Canyon in order to get a perfect view of a cluster of red rock temples, which appeared at the time to be the court of a king. Soon afterwards, I received information that one of the Kachinas that had been living in Palatkwapi was Masao. Remember, Masao is the Lord and King of the world. So I believe that the formations and the temples that I saw and I thought were the court of a king were actually the court of a king. The slide you see in front of you is a photograph of the temples that you see as you were walking into the court of the king. And this slide is one of the temples in the court of the king, and it has the shape of an elephant with its baby. This slide on your left is a phantom-like being with spindly fingers that was attached to one of the temples at the court, and to the right of it is a figure that appears to be a warrior or a knight. You see his cap and his nose and his eyes. And so I call it the Knight of the Court of the King. And this slide reveals what looks to be the remains of an ancient temple. And so this is also part of the cluster of temples that I call the Court of the King. Now, since that time, I have heard prophecies regarding the return of the Star People. In fact, there's a rock on Hopi Reservation next to the famous Prophecy Rock that has an image carved upon it that looks like a combination of a house and a flying saucer disc. You can see it there, and Grandfather Martin standing next to it. The Hopi maintain that this is a symbol of their Star People ancestors who came in the past and are returning now. Their return officially began in the 1970s, and at that time, the sky above the reservation was suddenly lit up with ships, starships, almost nearly every night. So the Star People were returning to reconnect with their descendants, the Hopis, as well as those places they helped to build, such as Sedona. Their return will culminate in the beginning of the Fifth World, which is a time that's prophesied to be a period when we all recognize our ancient connections, all the nations around the world, as well as our ancient connections to the Star People. Now, the information I've presented in this video, plus much, much more, is contained in my book, Sedona, City of the Star People. The book chronologues most of the important experiences I've had over the past 30 years as Palatkwapi has been revealed to me, and there's a number of secrets in it that I have not revealed during this video. An autographed copy of the book can be acquired through the website at the bottom of the slide. And if you're interested, I also take people on tours around Sedona in order to show them the residual red rock landmarks of Palatkwapi. And while I'm doing so, I give all the histories and the legends about Palatkwapi. You can learn more about these tours through the website below. Just simply go to the home page and then click on Star People Tours on the horizontal menu at the top of the page. And on that website, we also have many books and courses that you might be interested in. A lot of them present ancient history in other parts of the globe. So for myself and those of us in the Order of the Seven Rays, thank you very much for watching this video on the City of the Star People. And if you haven't pushed that subscribe button, please do now. And so we can talk to you later in other videos. Anyway, thanks again. Namaste.